The lilies smelled sickly sweet, and yet the sweetness only made the air heavier. I sat in the front pew, my cane resting against the bench, hands clenched in my lap. The whispers floated behind me about Harold's death, about my fragile health, about what would happen to me now. None of them dared to say it out loud, but I could feel their eyes. Then she appeared, draped in black, her heels clicking softly on the tile floor. She slid into the space beside me as though she belonged there. Her perfume overpowered the lilies. She leaned close, so close that her lips nearly touched my ear, and whispered the sentence that shattered what little peace I had left. Why struggle? Your husband's love was mine long before he died. Except the ending, I froze. My breath caught. The church bells tolled, and I felt the sound deep in my bones. My husband's coffin was just feet away, and here she was, claiming him as hers. I wanted to scream. I wanted to deny it, but my body wouldn't move. My cane slipped slightly against the bench, and I gripped it with trembling fingers. The woman's smile was poised, flawless, as if the funeral were a stage and she was the star. My grief, my broken body, my silence, all of it only seemed to strengthen her performance. The priest spoke of Harold's kindness, his loyalty, his years of service to the community. My chest tightened at every word. I had believed in that loyalty for decades, hadn't I? But now, one whisper poisoned every memory. I dared to glance sideways at her. She sat upright, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears that looked rehearsed. And then she did something unforgivable. She placed her hand over mine, as if to comfort me. The coldness of her touch made me recoil, but the people behind us couldn't see my disgust. To them, it must have looked like compassion. I could almost hear the judgment forming. What a good friend she must have been to Harold. What a generous woman standing by his widow now. But I knew better. Or did I? The doubt crept in like a shadow. Had Harold truly loved her? Was I nothing more than the crippled wife, the burden he carried, until he found someone who made him feel alive? Tears blurred my vision. I heard the priest announce Harold's final rest, the closing of the casket. The wood thudded as it was sealed, and I flinched as if struck. I wanted to run forward, to stop them, to beg Harold for the truth. But my legs betrayed me, as they often did. My cane wasn't enough to carry me to him. So I sat there, silent, watching. The coffin lowered into the earth, and I realized something with a hollow ache. I was burying my husband, yes, but also burying the life I thought I had. She leaned in once more, her breath warm and cruel against my cheek. "Smile for them," she murmured. "You don't want anyone to see how broken you really are." For the first time, I turned to her. I let her see the fury behind my grief. I didn't speak, not yet. But inside, something shifted. I knew one thing. This story was no longer just about Harold's death. It was about her. And before I could stop myself, a thought rose sharp and clear in my mind. If this is the ending she wants, I will show her what endings can become. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I have to share here. And comment where you're watching from, because I need to know how far this story reaches. Tomorrow, I will tell you what happened after the funeral, when she stepped into my home as if it were already hers. The funeral ended, but the performance continued. People filed out of the church, murmuring condolences I barely heard. Their eyes flicked between me and her, the elegant shadow who hovered at my side. She accepted their sympathy with a grace that wasn't hers to wear. To them, she looked like family. To me, she looked like a thief. By the time we reached my house, I was exhausted. My body ached with every step, my cane barely steadying me. I had imagined walking into silence, pouring myself tea, sitting in Harold's chair, maybe letting the grief wash over me in private. But when I opened the front door, she was already there. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for an invitation. She simply moved past me, her heels tapping on my wooden floors, her eyes scanning the rooms as though she were cataloging what would soon be hers. "This is where Harold spent his evenings, isn't it?" she asked, running her hand across the arm of his favorite chair. I stiffened. Yes. With me, her lips curved into something between a smile and a smirk. Of course! Guests trailed in behind us, dropping off casseroles and murmured prayers. I couldn't tell if they were comforting me or watching me crumble. She greeted each of them, guiding them as if she were the lady of the house. Kitchen is this way, she said smoothly, pointing the way. Restrooms down the hall. And they followed her, as though she'd always belonged here. I stood in my own doorway, invisible. For a moment, anger surged so strongly that I almost shouted, but my voice caught in my throat. My disability had always been a quiet prison. It kept me slow, it kept me still, and now it kept me silent. My legs could not carry me fast enough to stop her. My words felt too fragile against her confidence. I tried to focus on Harold's pictures on the wall. Our wedding photo, our vacations, the anniversaries we celebrated. Proof that I had been his wife, his partner, his family. But then she pointed at one of the frames and said loudly, "He loved that trip, didn't he?" He told me it was the happiest he'd ever been. The room went still. Eyes shifted toward me, waiting for my reaction. My chest tightened. Those were words Harold had once whispered to me. Now she had claimed them for herself, and no one questioned it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced a smile. My lips trembled, but I held it there. "Yes," I said softly. "He did." Her gaze locked with mine. She knew what she was doing. She was rewriting my history, turning my life into her story. As the night stretched on, she moved with ease through every corner of my house. She poured drinks in Harold's crystal glasses. She spoke about his habits, how he liked his tea strong, how he left his books half-read on the nightstand. Details only I should have known. Details that made me wonder, had he told her? Or had she been here, in this house, when I wasn't looking? When the last guest left, I thought she would finally go. Instead, she stayed. She sat in Harold's chair, crossing her legs like a queen claiming her throne. "You should rest," she said sweetly. "Grief is heavy." I gripped my cane, fighting the urge to swing it at her smug face. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice shaking. She leaned forward. Her eyes gleamed in the low light. "Because this was always my place." "He loved you once, but not enough. Not the way he loved me." Her words sliced through me, each one leaving a wound no one could see. I wanted to call her a liar. I wanted to remind her that I had worn the ring, shared the bed, built the life. But all I managed was a whisper. "You're cruel." She tilted her head. "No, I'm honest. And honesty hurts, doesn't it?" The clock chimed midnight. She stood, smoothing her dress. "Don't worry, dear. You'll get used to me. They all will." And with that, she walked upstairs. Upstairs. To the bedroom I had shared with Harold for decades. I clutched the banister, my legs trembling. My home was no longer mine. My marriage was no longer sacred. My grief was no longer private. And for the first time since Harold's death, I understood. She wasn't just a shadow passing through. She was here to stay. I stared at the darkened staircase and whispered to myself, "This isn't over. Not yet." Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, but it brought me no warmth. I woke alone in a house that no longer felt like mine. Every sound reminded me of her, the clatter of cups in the kitchen, the creak of the stairs as she moved freely where she had no right to be. I used to wake to Harold's gentle cough, the rustle of his newspaper. Now I woke to her humming, a tune I didn't recognize, one that didn't belong in these walls. When I finally made my way downstairs, leaning heavily on my cane, she was already seated at the table. Harold's chair, his mug, his smile etched into her expression as though she were rehearsing it. "Good morning," she said lightly, like this was natural. "I thought I'd make breakfast." Harold always loved when I cooked for him. The words landed like stones. I froze in the doorway. That was my role. For years, I'd adjusted recipes for his health, prepared meals even when my body begged me to rest. And now, she claimed it without shame. I lowered myself into the opposite chair, my hands trembling. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. She sipped from his mug. "Shouldn't I? Harold wanted me here. He told me so. He said you were tired, that he needed someone stronger. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. All my life, people had looked at my disability as weakness. I had fought against it, refused to let it define me. But now she wielded it like a weapon, carving away what little pride I had left. Before I could respond, the front door opened. My son stepped inside. My heart leapt. Maybe he would defend me. Maybe he would send her away. "Mom," he said, his eyes darting between us. "She told me you weren't feeling well." So I turned to him, desperate. "She doesn't belong here. She's trying to replace me. Can't you see that?" He shifted uncomfortably. "She was with Dad. A lot. She says you shouldn't be alone now. She just wants to help." The words stung more than any insult. My son, my flesh and blood, believed her. Not me. I searched his face for the boy I had raised, the boy who once clung to my skirt when storms frightened him. But he was gone. In his place stood a man who looked at me like a burden. She smiled at him, her hand brushing his arm. "She's grieving, dear. Don't be too hard on her. We'll take care of her. We." That single word was enough to break something inside me. They were united. I was the outsider, the forgotten wife, the inconvenient mother. I wanted to shout the truth, to tell him about her whispers, her cruel claims. But my son's gaze told me he wouldn't believe me. She had already woven her web, and he was caught in it. Later that afternoon, friends and neighbors came by with food and condolences. They asked after me politely, but their attention drifted to her. She charmed them effortlessly, recalling Harold's stories, laughing softly at memories she had no right to share. At one point, I overheard a neighbor murmur, "She was so close to him. It's good she's here for his wife now." For his wife, as if I wasn't even in the room. I excused myself, retreating to Harold's study, my sanctuary, my safe place. But even there, I felt her presence, like a shadow pressing against the walls. I sat in his chair, clutching his pen, trying to breathe. Had I been so invisible in my marriage that no one saw me now? Had Harold himself seen me as nothing more than a fragile figure, tolerated but unloved? The questions circled until I felt dizzy. That night, as I prepared for bed, I heard them laughing downstairs. My son and her. Their voices rose and fell in a rhythm that made me ache with loneliness. For years, I had fought to keep this family together. Now I was watching it dissolve in front of me, and I was powerless to stop it. I closed my bedroom door and whispered to the dark, "I am still here. I will not vanish." But deep down, a terrifying thought whispered back, "What if they had already erased me?" Grief has a way of pulling you toward the past. That night, when the house finally went quiet, I searched for Harold's scent, his touch, any sign that I had not dreamed our life together. My cane tapped softly as I made my way into his study. The study was where Harold and I shared so many evenings, he with his books, me with my needlework. I traced the edges of the desk, each groove familiar to my fingers. But when I pulled open a drawer, something strange caught my eye. A stack of envelopes tied with a ribbon. My heart skipped. They weren't mine. They weren't addressed to me. The name scrawled in Harold's handwriting made my knees weaken. It was hers. I sat down heavily, the cane clattering to the floor. My hands shook as I untied the ribbon. One letter slid free, and I read the words that should have belonged only to me. "You are my light in the dark. With you, I feel alive again." I wish I could tell her the truth, but she would never understand. "Only you know my heart." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I pressed the letter to my chest, as if holding it could change its meaning, but the ink didn't lie. I opened another, then another. Each one was a dagger. He wrote about stolen afternoons, about how she listened when I did not, about how she gave him laughter when I gave him silence. Silence. That word burned. Was my quietness, my fatigue, my constant battle with pain. What pushed him into her arms? Had my disability made me unworthy of his love? I wanted to scream, to rip the letters to shreds, to burn them so no one else could ever see. But I couldn't move. I could only sit there, suffocating under the weight of betrayal. The sound of a footstep startled me. She appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with that maddening calm. "I wondered when you'd find those," she said. My throat tightened. "You knew they were here?" She smiled. "Of course." "He left them for me. I didn't need to hide them. He wanted you to see them one day. He wanted the truth to come out." Her words sliced through me like glass. "You're lying!" She shrugged, her eyes gleaming. "Am I? Or are you just afraid I'm telling the truth?" I gripped the letters, desperate to protect them from her hands. They were poison, but they were also all I had left of Harold. His voice, even if it condemned me. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "He told me you couldn't give him what he needed. That you lived in your own world of pain and shadows. I gave him light. I gave him joy." The room spun. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Every insecurity I had buried for years rose to the surface. Was I truly so inadequate? Had Harold loved me out of duty while loving her out of passion? I clutched the letters tighter, my nails digging into the paper. "Get out," I managed, my voice raw. She tilted her head, her expression softening into mock pity. "Don't worry, dear. The truth hurts now, but you'll learn to live with it. Just like you'll learn to live with me." She turned and walked away, leaving me trembling in Harold's study. I stared at the letters spread across the desk. Part of me wanted to destroy them. Another part whispered that I needed to keep them, to remember that I wasn't crazy, that her poison wasn't only in her words, but in his as well. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Harold's chair, surrounded by the ghosts of his betrayal, clutching letters that weren't meant for me. And somewhere between the lines of his words and her cruel whispers, I realized something terrifying. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes and stiff fingers, the letters still clutched in my lap. My body ached, not just from the weight of grief, but from the truth that had seeped into my bones overnight. Harold's words, her whispers, they had blended into one cruel melody I could not silence. I barely had time to gather myself before the doorbell rang. Voices filled the house again, family, cousins, neighbors. They came carrying sympathy wrapped in dishes and flowers, but sympathy was not what I received. She was already there, standing in the living room like a hostess. Her black dress had been exchanged for a soft gray one, modest but elegant. She looked every bit the grieving widow, except she wasn't. "Thank you all for coming," she said warmly, her hand resting lightly on my son's shoulder. "We know how much Harold meant to you." "We." Again that word. It lodged in my chest like a thorn. I tried to speak, to assert myself, but she glided forward, taking command of the room. She recounted Harold's last months, his struggles, his dreams, things I should have been the one to share. Yet somehow she knew them too. At one point, my sister-in-law turned to me and whispered, "She really was close to him, wasn't she?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Close? Closer than I had been, apparently. Then came the worst blow. My son, my only child, stood beside her, nodding at every word she said. When someone asked about the estate, about the house, about the future, he glanced at her before answering, as though she were the authority, not me. She seized the moment. "We've all seen how hard this has been on her," she said gently, gesturing toward me as if I were a fragile ornament. "With her health, with the pain she's endured." Harold worried. He confided in me many times. He didn't want her to carry burdens she couldn't manage. A murmur rippled through the room. I shook my head violently. "That's not true. He never—" But my son cut me off, his voice low, almost embarrassed. "Mom, maybe she's right. Maybe you shouldn't have to handle everything. Maybe it's time we help." The word felt like a betrayal wrapped in kindness. They weren't helping me. They were pushing me aside. My cane clattered against the floor as I struggled to stand. "This is my home." Harold built this life with me. No one gets to take that from me. For a brief second, silence fell. I thought maybe they would see me, hear me, remember who I was. But then she stepped forward, her voice sweet as honey. No one wants to take anything, dear. We only want what's best for you, and just like that, heads nodded. Faces softened toward her, not me. I was no longer the grieving wife. I was the obstacle to be managed. I looked to my son, pleading silently, but he avoided my eyes, focusing instead on her. My heart cracked with a soundless snap. After they left, the house felt like a stranger's. I wandered from room to room, touching the walls, the pictures, Harold's books, my proof that I had belonged here. But their whispers lingered. She's too weak. She can't handle it. He trusted someone else. Later that night, I heard laughter downstairs. My son and her sharing wine, their voices low and intimate. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my cane. I wanted to storm in, to tell him the truth, to scream that she had stolen his father, his family, his legacy. But I knew what would happen. He would look at me with pity, then turn back to her. So instead, I sat in the dark, whispering into the emptiness of my room. They've turned against me, but I will not break. Not yet, because deep inside, beneath the layers of grief and betrayal, a flicker of something remained. Not hope, not love, but a quiet, simmering fire. And one day, that fire would burn through her lies. I thought the letters were the worst of it. I thought the betrayal was complete. But betrayal, I learned, has layers, like wounds that reopen each time you think they've finally healed. It began when I visited Harold's doctor. I needed to settle the last of his medical bills, a task I dreaded but couldn't avoid. The receptionist offered me a polite smile, then handed me a thin folder. He always came with her, she said casually. I froze. With who? She tilted her head, confused. The other woman. I assumed you knew. She was always at his side, asking the questions, holding his hand. We thought she was family. My cane nearly slipped from my grip. I had never been to those appointments. Harold told me he wanted to protect me, that the long waits and painful discussions weren't good for my health. I had believed him, trusted him. Now I knew the truth. He hadn't wanted to protect me. He had wanted to protect her. I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the reports. Words blurred, but a few sentences cut through. Diagnosis discussed with patient and companion. Treatment options explained to spouse. Spouse. The word leapt off the page. She had been mistaken for me, and Harold had never corrected them. A hollow laugh escaped me. Even in his illness, even in his suffering, he had chosen her over me. When I returned home, she was in the kitchen, humming again, her hands arranging flowers she must have bought herself. She looked up, her smile soft and knowing. Tough day? She asked. I dropped the folder on the table. You were with him. Her smile widened. Of course. He needed someone who understood I was his wife, I snapped, my voice cracking. That was my place. She leaned closer, her eyes gleaming. No, dear. You were his obligation. I was his choice. The words cut deeper than any knife. I stumbled backward, clutching the table for support. My chest heaved as though I'd been struck. I wanted to hit her, to scream, to shatter the mask she wore so proudly. But all I could do was whisper, You're lying. She tilted her head, feigning pity. Believe what you want. But I was the one he trusted with his pain. Not you that night. I searched Harold's desk again, desperate for something to prove her wrong. I found his planner, pages filled with neat handwriting, dates circled, appointments underlined. Beside some of them, in the margin, her initials. It felt like the floor vanished beneath me. I sank into his chair, the weight of betrayal pressing me down. Every moment I had thought was mine alone. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, was now tainted by her shadow. The following day, I overheard my son speaking with her. His voice was low, uncertain. She told me about the doctor visits, he said. Mom didn't know? Her reply was smooth, practiced. We didn't want to upset her. You know how fragile she can be. It was better this way, better this way. I pressed my hand over my mouth, stifling a sob. My son murmured something, and then he sighed. Maybe you're right. Maybe Mom couldn't have handled it. I closed my eyes, the tears spilling freely. He believed her again. He believed her always. Later, when I confronted him, his expression was weary. Mom! Dad leaned on her. That doesn't mean he didn't love you. It just means maybe he needed more than you could give. The words shattered me. From my own son. I turned away, hiding my trembling hands. My disability had been my burden, but I never thought it would be turned into a weapon. Now it was the very reason my husband had chosen another. That night, as I lay awake, the house felt colder than ever. My son's footsteps echoed upstairs, her laughter floating through the walls. The walls that once held Harold and me together now pressed in like a tomb. And I whispered to the darkness, she took his love, she took his secrets, and now she's taking my family. But beneath the despair, the fire inside me flickered again. Because if she thought I would surrender quietly, she was wrong. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood and old paper. I had been there before with Harold, back when we were younger, when life stretched endlessly ahead of us. Back then, we had spoken about our future, our son, even about me being taken care of if anything happened. I clung to those memories as I sat across from Mr. Alden, our family lawyer. My cane leaned against the chair, my hands knotted in my lap. My son sat beside me, stiff and distant. And across the room, of course, she was there, poised, calm, her black dress replaced with navy silk that whispered power. Mr. Alden cleared his throat. We're here to read Harold's last will and testament. I straightened, bracing myself. This, I thought, would be my anchor. Harold had made promises after all. He would have ensured I was secure. He would have remembered me. But as the lawyer's voice filled the room, my heart sank. To my beloved son, I leave the estate, including the house and its contents. My fingers tightened on the arm of the chair. The words blurred, but I caught fragments. Investments, property, assets. All of it, going to my son. Not to me, not even shared. And to my companion, for her loyalty and support. Mr. Alden hesitated. A personal trust fund. I gasped, my chest tightening. A trust fund? For her? My breath caught, the room spinning. I looked to my son, desperate for him to say something, to defend me. But he only lowered his eyes, silent. She, on the other hand, smiled. That calm, victorious smile. She folded her hands neatly, as if she had expected this all along. I forced my voice to steady. There must be a mistake. Harold would never. He knew I needed. Mr. Alden looked at me with pity, not certainty. I'm afraid these were his wishes, Mrs. Whitmore. The documents are clear. Her gaze met mine, her expression soft with false sympathy. I told you, dear. He wanted me cared for. He wanted me remembered. The words scraped across my heart. Remembered. As though I, his wife, was already forgotten. I stood abruptly, my cane trembling under my weight. This isn't right. Harold promised me. He promised. My son touched my arm. Mom, please. Don't make a scene. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Don't make a scene, I whispered. They're taking everything from me. He looked away. And in that silence, I understood. He had already accepted it. He had already chosen her side. The lawyer droned on, explaining legal clauses and signatures. But I barely heard him. My ears rang with her whisper from the funeral. Why struggle? Your husband's love was mine long before he died. Accept the ending. When the meeting ended, I moved slowly toward the door, my cane tapping against the polished floor. Behind me, she lingered, her voice low but sharp enough for me to hear. Now it's official, she said. You can't fight paper, dear. I turned, my eyes blazing despite the tears threatening to fall. Paper can burn, I said hoarsely. Her smile faltered for a moment, but only for a moment. Then she stepped closer, her perfume filling the air. Yes, but ashes don't bring back what's already gone. The words hung between us, cruel and final. On the ride home, my son drove in silence. I stared out the window, the city blurring past. Every memory of Harold, every promise he'd made, now felt like lies whispered to keep me still. At the house, she was waiting at the door, her expression calm, welcoming, as if she already owned the place. "Welcome home," she said sweetly. I looked past her into the hallway I had walked 1,000 times, now foreign, tainted. My hand tightened on my cane until my knuckles ached. Home. The word no longer belonged to me. That night, as I lay awake, I realized something terrible. The will wasn't just words on paper. It was the knife Harold had left behind, the one she now twisted gleefully into me. And yet, deep inside, the fire flickered once more. Because paper may hold power, but so does truth. Grief has many faces, but pity is the cruelest. I had survived whispers at the funeral, survived the betrayal in Harold's letters, survived the humiliation of the will, but nothing pierced me deeper than her performance of kindness. It began the morning after the lawyer's meeting. She brought me tea on a silver tray, placing it in front of me with a smile that could have fooled anyone watching. "You must be tired," she said softly, tucking the napkin beside my hand. "All this strain can't be good for your health. Don't worry, we'll take care of you." We. Again that word. It coiled around me like a rope tightening. I wanted to throw the cup across the room. Instead, I lifted it with trembling fingers and forced myself to sip. The tea tasted bitter, though I knew it was only in my mind. My son entered the kitchen, his eyes flicking between us. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice carrying just enough tremor to sound believable. "She's so strong," she told him. "But I worry. Grief like this, it can break even the bravest hearts." My son's jaw tightened. He moved to my side, but not in the way I hoped. He looked at me with pity, the same pity she had planted in his eyes. "Mom," he said gently, "maybe you should let her help. Just until things settle." The room swayed. My own child saw me as weak, incapable. And it wasn't because of my illness, or my cane, or my grief. It was because she had whispered it into him, drop by drop, until he believed it. I turned away, blinking back tears. "I don't need her help," I whispered, but she only smiled, brushing her hand against my arm like a benevolent angel. "Of course you don't, dear." But sometimes even the strongest need someone to lean on her pity was sharper than any insult. It was the knife she drove into me again and again, always with that sweet smile. That afternoon, neighbors came to visit. She greeted them at the door, guiding them into the living room as though she were the hostess. I followed slowly, my cane clicking against the floor, but by the time I entered, the conversation was already hers. "She's doing remarkably well," she told them, glancing at me with feigned admiration. "I was so worried at first, but she's stronger than I imagined." The guests looked at me, nodding sympathetically, as though I were a fragile artifact on display. I wanted to shout, to tell them how she mocked me when no one else was listening, but my voice felt trapped in my throat. When they left, she turned to me, her expression softening into something crueler than anger. "You see, dear? They admire you. They think you're brave. Isn't that what you want?" I clenched my fists. "You're twisting everything." She tilted her head. "No, I'm shaping it. There's a difference." That night, as I sat alone in my bedroom, I thought of all the times Harold had looked at me with pity instead of love. I remembered the way his eyes softened when I stumbled, when my pain kept me from dancing, when fatigue left me breathless. I had told myself it was compassion, but now I wondered, was it always pity? The thought hollowed me out. If pity had been his true feeling, then she hadn't stolen his love. She had simply taken what was never mine to begin with. My chest ached with the weight of it. I pressed my face into Harold's pillow, trying to remember the warmth of his voice, but all I heard was hers. The knife of pity, hers, his, even my son's, had left me bleeding in ways no one else could see. Yet even as the tears stained my pillow, that flicker of fire inside me refused to die. Pity might wound me, but it would not erase me. I whispered into the dark, "One day, they'll see. One day, the mask she wears will crack, and when it does, I will not be the one they pity." The calendar mocked me. Harold and I had always circled our anniversary date in red ink, a small tradition we never abandoned, no matter how busy or tired we were. I found myself standing before that calendar now, my cane steadying me, my hand trembling as I traced the square. It should have been a day of flowers, of gentle words, of quiet laughter at old memories. Instead, it became a day of humiliation. She remembered. When I came downstairs, she had already set the table. Roses in a vase, candles lit, 2 plates. She wore a soft blue dress that Harold had once told me made her eyes shine. I knew because I had been the one who bought it for her years ago, thinking it a gift for a friend. She smiled when she saw me. "Did you forget? Today was always his favorite day. He used to say it was when he truly began living, the room tilted." Those words, "he truly began living," were words Harold once whispered to me on our 10th anniversary when we renewed our vows. Now they were hers to claim, her performance flawless. My son entered the room just then, and she turned to him with a laugh. "Your father was so romantic, wasn't he? Do you remember when he surprised me with that necklace?" I froze. That necklace! A gold chain I had once asked about, back when Harold brought it home, claiming it was a gift for a client. I had believed him, because belief was easier than suspicion. Now the truth sat shining at her neck. My son nodded slowly, as though the memory belonged to him as well. My throat closed. My family, my memories, were being rewritten before my eyes. I lowered myself into a chair, the cane rattling against the wood. "He gave me flowers every year," I whispered. She tilted her head, her smile soft and pitying. "Yes, dear." He gave us both something the implication hit harder than any slap. Both. I had not been a wife. I had been half of one. Dinner passed in silence, broken only by her laughter, her stories, her careful weaving of Harold's love into her own tapestry. Each word was a thread pulled from my marriage and knotted into hers. Later, I escaped to Harold's study. I needed proof, any proof, that I had not been invisible in my own life. I opened drawers, pulled out old photo albums, clutched at anything that could anchor me. And then I found it. A faded card, tucked between the pages of a book. "To my wife, always and forever. You are my anchor." My chest ached as I pressed it to my heart. Tears blurred the ink, but they couldn't erase the words. For a moment, I felt like I could breathe again. But then her voice drifted from the hallway, low and mocking. "Do you really think a card proves anything? Words are easy. Actions are harder. And his actions were with me." I turned, the card trembling in my hands. She stood in the doorway, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "You've spent years clinging to scraps," she continued, "but deep down, you know the truth. You were his duty, I was his joy." My knees buckled, and I sank into Harold's chair. The card fluttered to the desk, suddenly weightless. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Accept it. That way, it won't hurt so much." But she was wrong. Acceptance didn't numb the pain. It sharpened it. When she left, I stared at the card lying on the desk. A simple piece of paper, fragile and fading. Yet it was the only proof I had left that I had been loved, even if only in part. I pressed my palm flat against it and whispered, "I was here. I mattered." But as the night grew quiet, a darker thought settled in. What if she was right? What if my anniversaries, my memories, my love, had always been just scraps, while she feasted on the rest? A mother's heart is stubborn. Even when the world turns against her, she clings to the hope that her child will return, will see the truth, will defend her. That hope had kept me breathing through Harold's betrayal and her cruelty. But hope, I learned, can be a crueler poison than despair. It happened one evening when the air outside was heavy with rain. I was sitting in the living room, knitting with stiff fingers, trying to quiet my mind. My son came in, his face tight, his jaw clenched. She followed a few steps behind, her expression calm, as if she already knew what he was about to say. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "we need to talk." The words chilled me. He sat across from me, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the child who ran to me when nightmares woke him, the teenager who promised he'd always protect me. But that boy was gone. "I think," he said slowly, "it would be better if I moved in here." With her, my knitting needles slipped from my hands. The yarn unraveled across the carpet like a wound splitting open. "You... what?" I whispered. He glanced at her, then back at me. "She understands me. She was there for Dad when things got hard. She's been helping me, guiding me. And I think Dad would have wanted this." My cane rattled as I tried to stand. "Dad would have wanted you with me, not with her. She's poisoned everything. She's poisoned you." Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder, her voice honeyed. "Don't be angry with him. He's only trying to do what's best for you. We both are." My son's eyes filled with something between pity and frustration. "Mom, I'm not choosing against you. I need stability, and she gives me that." The words slammed into me like a blow. She gave him stability? I was the one who raised him, who stayed up through his fevers, who sacrificed when Harold was too busy. And now he looked at me as if I were the problem. "You're choosing her," I said hoarsely, "over your own mother." Silence hung heavy. He didn't deny it. The fire in my chest burned hotter than ever. "One day you'll see who she really is. And when that day comes, don't expect me to pick up the pieces." He looked away, his shoulders sagging. She leaned closer to him, whispering something I couldn't hear. His nod was small, hesitant, but final. That night, he carried a bag into her room. My son, my blood, sharing walls, meals, and dreams with the woman who had destroyed our family. I sat in the darkened hallway, the sound of their muffled laughter drifting through the door. My cane lay across my lap, heavy as iron. Every tap of its tip on the floor echoed in my ears like a heartbeat. I whispered into the shadows, "They've taken Harold. They've taken my home, and now they've taken my son." Grief should have broken me. Instead, it carved something harder inside me. Because if even my son could be turned against me, then I had nothing left to lose. And a woman with nothing left to lose is dangerous. Boxes. They appeared slowly at first, stacked neatly in the hallway, labeled in her precise handwriting. Then they spread, filling corners, crowding rooms, swallowing my life piece by piece. "These are just the things you don't need anymore," she explained sweetly when I confronted her. "We're helping you downsize. It will make things easier for you, we. Always we." I stood in the middle of my living room, the cane trembling in my grip, watching as strangers carried my belongings into trucks, my wedding china, Harold's favorite books, even the blanket I had knitted during my son's infancy. "This is my home," I whispered, my voice breaking. "These are my memories." She tilted her head, pity softening her smile into something sharper than cruelty. "Your memories live in you, dear. Things are just things. Don't hold on so tightly." But they weren't just things. They were pieces of me, anchors that proved I had existed, that I had been Harold's wife, my son's mother, the heart of this house. And now they were being stripped away, leaving walls that felt hollow, foreign. At dinner that night, I sat at a table that looked less and less like mine. She set down the plates with grace, while my son busied himself with small talk. I tried to eat, but every bite tasted like ashes. "Doesn't it feel lighter?" she asked brightly. "The house is breathing again." "It feels freer, as though my presence had been a weight choking the walls. I placed my fork down, my hands shaking. "Freer for you, perhaps." She smiled, unbothered. "For all of us." Even Harold would agree. The words hit me like a slap. "Don't you dare speak for him." But my son intervened, his voice weary. "Mom, please." "She's just trying to help. You've been holding on to too much." I turned to him, my heart breaking all over again. "She's taking everything from me. Can't you see that?" His eyes flickered with discomfort, but he didn't answer. Silence was worse than denial. It meant he knew, and chose her anyway. Later that evening, I found her in Harold's study. She stood by the window, staring out at the garden Harold and I had planted together. Without turning, she spoke. "You should rest. Let us handle things. You've done enough." Her tone was final, dismissive. It was as though my life's work, the meals, the care, the sacrifices, had been reduced to a finished chore. "You've done enough." As if my existence had reached its expiration. I gripped the back of Harold's chair, my knuckles white. "You don't belong here." Finally, she turned, her smile faint. "Oh, but I do. You're the one who doesn't." The truth of her ambition gleamed in her eyes. She didn't just want Harold. She wanted everything: his name, his son, his house, his legacy. And step by step, she was taking it. That night, I wandered the halls, cane tapping softly against the floor. Every room echoed with absence. The photographs on the walls seemed to watch me with silent pity. Even the floors creaked differently, as though rejecting me. I paused at Harold's chair, running my fingers across the worn leather. My knees buckled, and I sank into it. This had been his place, our place. Now it was contested ground, divided between my grief and her victory. I whispered into the silence, "You can strip the walls, empty the rooms, poison the people I love, but you cannot erase me, not yet." The house may have been divided, but my spirit, my fire, still burned. It was past midnight when I heard them. Their voices drifted through the thin walls, low at first, then sharp enough to slice through my half-sleep. I sat up, clutching my cane, my heart hammering in the dark. I leaned closer to the door, straining to catch every word. "She'll never accept it," my son said, his voice heavy. "She still thinks Dad loved her more." Her laugh was soft, cold. "Let her think what she wants. She doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is that you and I know the truth." I pressed my palm against the wall, trembling. The truth? Which truth? That Harold had betrayed me? That my son now belonged to her? My son sighed. "She raised me, you know. It feels wrong to just leave her behind." Her tone shifted, silk covering steel. "She raised you, yes. But who's standing with you now? Who was with your father at the end? Who understands you?" She had her time. Now it's ours. Silence followed. Long, unbearable silence. Then I heard his voice, quiet but certain. "You're right." The words pierced me like a blade. My son, my only child, had made his choice. Tears blurred my vision as I staggered back to the bed. My cane clattered to the floor, but I barely heard it over the pounding in my ears. I pressed a pillow to my face to stifle the sobs that ripped through me. The next morning, I forced myself to move through the house as though nothing had happened. I brewed tea, folded laundry, tried to smile, but inside, my heart was raw and hollow. At breakfast, she poured coffee for my son, brushing her hand against his. They shared a quiet smile, the kind that spoke of secrets. My stomach churned. "Sleep well, Mom?" my son asked, his tone polite, distant. I nodded. Yes. A lie. But lies were all I had left to shield myself. The day stretched on, each hour heavier than the last. I overheard her on the phone, her voice low and deliberate. "She's fragile," she told someone, "barely managing. Soon she'll realize she can't keep this up. Then everything will fall into place," I knew then. She wasn't waiting for me to leave. She was waiting for me to collapse. That evening, as the rain tapped against the windows, I gathered the courage to confront her. I found her in the garden, pruning roses with Harold's old shears. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice shaking. You've already taken him. Isn't that enough? She looked up, her smile serene. Enough! Oh dear, you don't understand. It was never just about him. It was about everything. The house, the name, the legacy. And now, it's about your son too. My chest tightened. You don't love him. You're using him. Her eyes glinted. Love? Love is irrelevant. Influence matters. Power matters. And he chose me. That's all that matters. Her honesty was worse than her lies. At least lies could be doubted. This truth, spoken so calmly, left me trembling. I stumbled back inside, gripping the cane so tightly my knuckles whitened. The house felt colder, darker. Even the walls seemed to echo with her words. Later, I overheard my son again. This time, his voice cracked with doubt. She's my mother. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Her reply came, sharp and impatient. She's a shadow. Shadows fade. You can't build a future with shadows. And then, silence. Long, dreadful silence. No defense, no protest, just silence. That silence told me everything. He would not fight for me. He would not fight against her. He would simply let me fade. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. For the first time, I wondered if she was right. Perhaps I was nothing more than a shadow, clinging to a past that no longer existed. But as the night deepened, a whisper stirred inside me. Shadows can stretch, shadows can linger, shadows can haunt. And maybe that was how I would survive. When grief becomes unbearable, people tell you to seek justice. They say the law is blind, that it will protect what is right. I clung to that thought like a lifeline. If my son would not defend me, if Harold's promises had crumbled, perhaps the courts would see what I had endured. I gathered what strength I had left. Letters, documents, photographs, pieces of my life I believed would prove my place. With trembling hands, I carried them into Mr. Alden's office, begging him to help me fight. He hesitated. It won't be easy, he warned. She has influence now, and your son's support. Still, I insisted, I would not let her rewrite everything without resistance. Weeks later, we stood in the courtroom. I wore black again, not for Harold this time, but for the death of my illusions. My cane tapped against the cold marble floor as I entered. My son sat beside her, his gaze fixed firmly ahead, refusing to meet mine. She looked radiant, as though this were another stage for her performance. Dressed in ivory, her hair swept neatly back, she exuded innocence. A grieving companion wronged, not a thief exposed. The judge began, and I listened as her lawyer painted a picture of devotion. She was there through his illness, he declared. She cared for him when his wife could not. She was his true support. The words echoed through the room, each one hammering against my chest. My disability was no longer my private burden. It was their weapon, sharpened and polished to cut me down. When it was my turn, I tried to speak. My voice shook, but held steady enough. I was his wife. I was by his side for decades. She came into his life like a shadow and convinced him to turn away from me. But even as I spoke, I saw the judge's eyes flicker with pity, the same pity that had followed me everywhere. Not respect, not belief, just pity. Then came the final blow. She produced documents I had never seen, signed notes, scribbles in Harold's handwriting, witnesses claiming they had seen the two of them together for years. These prove, her lawyer said firmly, that her relationship with Harold was not a betrayal, but a partnership. One he wanted acknowledged. I shook my head violently. Lies. All of it. But my son stood, his voice breaking. Mom, Dad loved her. You need to accept it. The courtroom blurred. My knees buckled, and I clutched my cane as though it were the only thing keeping me from falling. My son's words, spoken in front of strangers, tore deeper than anything she had ever done. The judge's ruling came swiftly, mercilessly. She would keep the trust. She would keep her place. I would be given a small allowance for my care, as though I were a charity case. Her smile bloomed like a flower in winter. She had won. As I left the courtroom, the reporters' cameras flashed, their questions buzzing. Do you feel justice was served? Was Harold unfaithful? What will you do now? I lowered my head, my cane tapping against the steps. Each question felt like a stone hurled at me, each flash like lightning exposing my shame. Behind me, she spoke sweetly to the press. I only ever wanted what Harold wished. I'll honor him by caring for his family. Caring for his family. The audacity of it nearly made me stumble. She had taken my husband, my home, my son, and now she dared to claim she was caring for me. That night, I sat in my empty kitchen, the ruling papers spread before me. My fingers traced the lines of ink that had sealed my fate. Justice had failed me. The law had failed me. Even my son had failed me. I stared at the walls of my house, now echoing with her laughter, her footsteps, her voice. And I whispered, barely more than breath, if the law cannot see her lies, then only silence and time will reveal them. And when they do, I'll be waiting. The house was no longer mine. Every corner bore her mark. New curtains, new flowers, new fragrances that drowned out Harold's memory. My photographs had been pushed to the attic, my clothes folded into boxes, my life reduced to shadows in cardboard. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, I sat alone in the living room. My cane leaned against the arm of Harold's chair, my suitcase half-packed beside me. She entered quietly, gliding as if the floor itself welcomed her. Are you ready? She asked softly. I didn't answer. My hands trembled as I folded one of Harold's shirts, the last one I'd kept hidden away. The fabric smelled faintly of him, and for a moment, I pressed it to my face, inhaling as if it might bring him back. She stepped closer. It's better this way, you know. You'll have peace. No more fighting, no more pain. I looked up at her, my eyes burning. You mean you'll have peace? You've taken everything. What more could you want? Her lips curved into that familiar, infuriating smile. Acceptance. That's all. You can't win, dear. Why struggle? She leaned closer, her whisper echoing the words she had spoken at the funeral. It was always me. The air left my lungs. I gripped my cane, its weight the only anchor keeping me steady. I wanted to strike her, to scream, to shatter the calm mask she wore, but exhaustion bound me tighter than any rope. From the hallway, I heard footsteps. My son. He appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, I thought he had come to stop her, to beg me to stay, but his silence told me otherwise. He simply stood there, watching, while she placed a hand on his arm, her claim on him as firm as her claim on the house. Say goodbye, Mom, he murmured, his voice flat. The suitcase handle cut into my palm as I forced myself upright. Each step toward the door felt like a farewell, not just to the house, but to the life I had built brick by brick. The laughter, the meals, the holidays, all of it now belonged to her, retold in her voice, rewritten in her version of history. At the threshold, I paused. The walls seemed to whisper Harold's name. The shadows clung to my shoulders, like memories refusing to let go. I turned one last time. She stood in the center of the room, triumphant, her hand resting on the banister I had once gripped during long nights of pain. My son was beside her, his gaze lowered, already lost to her spell. I wanted to curse them both. Instead, I whispered, "This isn't over." Her smile widened, cold and sharp. "It already is." The door shut behind me with a final thud. The night air was cool, but it carried no comfort. My cane tapped against the pavement as I walked away, each step heavier than the last. I did not look back, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't bear to see the house I had lost, lit warmly as though it had never been mine. That night, I stayed in a small room at a distant cousin's house. The bed was stiff, the sheets smelled of strangers, but exhaustion swallowed me whole. I dreamt of Harold, his hand reaching for mine, only for her to step between us, smiling as he vanished into the dark. When I woke, my pillow was damp with tears. My suitcase sat at the foot of the bed, filled with fragments of a life too big to be carried away. It was the last night I would ever spend as the mistress of that house. The last night as Harold's wife in the eyes of the world. And yet, as the dawn light crept through the curtains, a thought lingered in my chest. They may have won the house, the name, the legacy, but they will never erase the truth of what I endured. For now, the ending was theirs. But endings have a way of echoing long after the curtain falls. Dawn crept quietly across the sky as I stood by the window of the borrowed room. The world outside stirred with new beginnings, children heading to school, shopkeepers unlocking their doors, neighbors greeting each other with smiles. For them, it was just another day. For me, it was the first day of life after everything I had known was taken. My cane tapped against the floor as I moved slowly to the small dresser where my suitcase sat. Inside were the fragments I had saved. A faded photograph, Harold's old pen, one of his shirts. Objects too small to hold the weight of a lifetime, yet too precious to leave behind. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply, letting the silence settle. And in that silence, I heard echoes. Not just of Harold's voice, but hers. Her whispers at the funeral, her laughter in my kitchen, her cruel reminder. Why struggle? It was always me. For days, I had resisted, clung, fought against the tide. But now, sitting in the dim morning light, I felt a strange stillness. Perhaps this was what surrender looked like. Not weakness, but a quiet acceptance that the battle was no longer mine to win. I thought of my son. His face when he looked at me, pity mixed with guilt. His silence when I begged him to see the truth. He was hers now, not mine. Maybe he always would be. That wound would never heal, but I carried it anyway, because that's what mothers do. They carry the pain their children cannot bear. I rose, crossing the room to the mirror. The woman staring back at me was not the same wife who had once walked through the church doors with Harold on her arm. She was older, thinner, marked by grief. But there was something else in her eyes. A hardness, a flicker of defiance that even betrayal couldn't extinguish. I whispered to my reflection, "You are still here." The words felt small, but they mattered. Because in the end, she could have my house, my son, even the story of Harold's love. But she could not erase my existence. I had lived, I had endured, and I would continue to do so. As the sun climbed higher, I gathered my courage and spoke to you, the unseen listener, the one who has walked with me through every twist of this story. If you followed me all the way to the end, your heart probably felt something. Maybe anger, maybe sorrow, maybe the sting of betrayal. I ask you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Let me know I am not alone in this world of endings and shadows. I paused, my fingers brushing Harold's shirt one last time. And if you want to keep walking through stories like mine, like this one, then like this video, subscribe, and stay with me. Because every story, even the darkest, deserves to be told. I turned away from the mirror, from the window, from the memories. My cane tapped softly as I whispered the final truth to myself and to you. End of script. Thank you for listening to the whole story. I hope you'll support my next work. And then, with the faintest of smiles, I closed the suitcase, ready to step into whatever silence awaited me next.